Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into something that has literally captivated humanity for tens of thousands of years, the shamanic trance. But, we aren't going to look at this through the lens of mysticism or magic. As researchers studying altered consciousness, we're zooming in through the lens of modern science. Because what we're actually looking at here is a highly sophisticated, ancient form of biohacking. Long before we had fMRI machines or advanced neurobiology, our ancestors developed rigorous, totally replicable technologies to manipulate the human nervous system.
Okay, let's dive into this. Here is our lab report for today's explainer. We're going to cover the science of trance, the mechanics of shamanic breathwork, posture and energy, hacking the brainwaves, the biology of healing, and wrap up with the future of altered consciousness. We're going to scientifically deconstruct these ancient practices step by step. Let's get to it.
Section 1. The Science of Trance. So, to study shamanism scientifically, we first need to lock down our baseline terminology. We need to define exactly what happens to our biological hardware when it shifts out of its normal waking state.
We're dealing with two big concepts here: altered state of consciousness, or ASC, and the shamanic state of consciousness, or SSC. If we kind of strip away the esoteric stigma for a second, what we're describing is a completely measurable biological phenomenon. It's a deliberate shift away from ordinary psychological functioning into a distinctly different pattern of perceiving, thinking, and feeling. And the absolutely crucial word here is intentionally. A shaman isn't just randomly daydreaming, right? They are intentionally inducing a specific brainwave state capable of facilitating really deep energy healing.
Now, what's really interesting about this is how perfectly we can bridge the gap between ancient vocabulary and modern clinical understanding. Ancient cultures just used different lexicons to describe actual neurophysiological mechanisms. When a shaman talks about moving prana, or chi, biologically, they're actively manipulating vital oxygen and endogenous energy. When they talk about clearing blockages, they're stimulating the central nervous system. And that legendary spirit flight or soul journey? From a strictly scientific standpoint, we're looking at a state of deep theta brainwave dissociation. It is the exact same human machinery, just described with a different user manual.
Moving right along to Section 2, Mechanics of Shamanic Breathwork. If we actually want to manipulate the nervous system to enter these altered states, the most immediate, accessible biological tool we've got is our breath. All right, I want you to break the fourth wall with me for a second and actually try this. We're looking at the biomechanics of a Tibetan shamanic breath practice known as kumbhaka, or vase retention. So first, inhale deeply right down into your belly. Now, lightly tense the perineum and pull up the pelvic floor. At the exact same time, tighten your diaphragm, that sheet of muscle right under your ribs, and push it downwards. You're literally compressing the breath in the center of your body, right behind your navel. Hold it. Do you feel that pressure? It almost feels like you're bracing to take a punch in the gut. You are using your own musculature as an energetic compressor, which profoundly alters your oxygen levels and vagal nerve tone. Okay, go ahead and exhale.
And this brings us to a huge realization, one perfectly captured by neuroscientist Candace Pert. She noted, all the chemicals one needs are already in our bodies. Outside chemicals only interfere. While things like exogenous plant medicines get a lot of hype in popular culture, a true foundational shamanic state is a natural, non-drug-induced altered state. By using techniques like the kumbhaka breath we just practiced, practitioners are tapping directly into their own internal pharmacy of endogenous chemicals.
Section 3. Posture, Movement, and Energy. Because breath is really just one piece of the puzzle, let's look at how specific physical alignments directly impact the central nervous system and basically prime the brain for a trance.
I'd love for you to check your own posture right now as we analyze this foundational meditative stance. Notice how the legs are crossed and the hands are folded in equipoise, resting right below the navel. Why do that? Well, it's definitely not just to look peaceful. Biomechanically speaking, crossing the limbs keeps the body's subtle electromagnetic energy, that endogenous energy, from dispersing outward. It literally forces that vital energy to continuously circulate back into the trunk of the body, which generates internal heat and intense clinical focus.
And this brilliantly illustrates our next point. Notice how the jaw is tucked slightly down and inward. It seems super simple, but when you do this, you instantly lengthen the cervical spine at the back of your neck. Clinically, this specific alignment straightens the central channels of the nervous system and directly quiets the cognitive thought processes in the frontal lobe. It's literally a physical mechanical switch that turns down your mental chatter.
So, putting on our researcher hats, let's summarize these 5 points of shamanic posture. Legs crossed to circulate energy.
hands folded to prevent dispersion, spine straight to open those central nervous channels, jaw tucked to quiet your thoughts, and the chest open to maximize our lung capacity. When you view it like this, it becomes pretty clear that this isn't just sitting still. This physical alignment is an ancient, highly refined technology designed to optimize the biological hardware of your nervous system for entering a healing trance state.
Section 4. Hacking the brainwaves. Okay, so our physical hardware is perfectly aligned. Now let's look at the actual neurological data. How exactly do shamans hack their brainwaves?
Just consider this comparison of two wild extremes used by indigenous practitioners to trigger altered states, sensory deprivation versus sensory overload. You can chase a trance by fasting and isolating yourself in a pitch-black cave, or you can achieve it through hyperventilation, intense ecstatic dance, and deafening, rhythmic drumming. Physiologically, both of these extremes do the exact same thing. They relentlessly push the brain over the edge, overwhelming its normal baseline until it just snaps into a deeply altered state of consciousness.
But there's actually a very specific metric to this madness. 4 to 4.5. According to clinical data, this is the exact metric of drum beats per second required to temporarily change your brainwave activity and consistently induce a shamanic journey.
This kind of intense rhythmic stimulation is known as auditory or photic driving. When a drum is beaten at that relentless 4.5 beats per second, the human brain begins to actually synchronize with the rhythm. It drops the brain's electrical activity way down from the fast-paced, waking beta state, right into the 4 to 7 Hz theta wave range. As researchers know, this theta range is the exact neurological state of conscious, waking daydreaming, vivid imagery, and incredibly deep, restorative meditation.
So the absolutely crucial point we need to take away is captured perfectly in Dr. Felicitas Goodman's groundbreaking 1977 lab discovery. She proved that if an experimental subject assumes those specific, non-ordinary body postures we just went over, and then you add the 4.5 beats per second of rhythmic stimulation, it predictably yields a visionary experience. It results in what ancient cultures call the quintessential spirit journey. It is quite literally a reliable biological equation for energy healing and brainwave modification.
Which brings us to Section 5, the biology of healing. We know how they do it, right? But we really need to understand why. We need to look at the tangible, biological healing that actually happens during these states.
A massive player in this whole healing process is endorphins, and that word literally translates to endogenous, meaning within, morphine. The sheer intense exertion of shamanic dancing, hyperventilation, and trance triggers a massive systemic release of these natural biochemicals. They attach to nerve cell receptors, dramatically reducing the body's sensitivity to pain and producing a profound sense of euphoria. But it definitely doesn't stop at just feeling good. This flood of endorphins and the shift in brainwaves actually lowers stress hormones, deeply relaxes the body, and actively builds up your immune resistance.
Finally, Section 6, the future of altered consciousness. What does all this ancient tech actually mean for our modern clinical understanding of human potential?
Let's move to how this builds our understanding of neuroplasticity. Modern science is really just now catching up, documenting that these deeply altered states aren't just temporary trips. The rhythmic driving, the targeted breathwork, the theta brainwave states, they actually generate new connections between neurons. Practitioners are effectively rewiring their own human brains, processing deep trauma, accessing subconscious information, and continuously boosting their physical immune response.
Which leaves us with this final, kind of mind-blowing thought to consider. Our ancestors didn't have pharmaceuticals, they didn't have high-tech labs, yet they successfully biohacked their central nervous systems using nothing but their own breath, calculated movements, and a rhythmic drumbeat to unlock profound physical and psychological healing. It really begs the question, as we constantly look outward to technology to solve our modern ailments, is the ultimate frontier of scientific discovery actually sitting right there, inside your own mind? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and hey, I highly encourage you to keep exploring the science of your own consciousness.